Once upon a time, not so very long ago, in a little kangaroo village, there lived Kankie Kangaroo and his mommy and daddy. Now one day, Kankie and his daddy were asleep in the forest, when all of a sudden, Daddy Kangaroo was awakened by a strange noise in the distance. "Wake up, Kankie," he said. "Wake up and listen." Kankie stirred ever so gently and said,
What is it, Daddy? What do you hear?
"Listen for yourself. I can't make head or tail of it." You see, what Kankie and his daddy heard were just some people like you and me who were playing and having a grand time. Right then, Kankie, who was curious, said,
Let's hop over and take a peek at what it is.
"Okay, son," said Daddy. "Let's hop." And away they hopped with a big long hop. And Kankie, 2 hops for every one of Daddy. You see, Daddy could hop 10 long feet each time, but Kankie, who was a young kangaroo, could hop only 5 feet each time. Well, before you could say Kankie Kangaroo backwards, there they were. They stood a few feet inside the forest so they couldn't be seen. And oh, what they saw and heard! There were a lot of boys and girls laughing and singing to the music of a concertina. Now, you know what a concertina is. It looks like a small accordion with buttons instead of keys. Kankie and Daddy stared at the concertina as the man slowly pushed it in and pulled it out and played all the buttons to make the most marvelous sounds they ever heard. All of a sudden, the sky turned black, and there was a big clap of thunder. The clouds started squeezing together, and it began to rain very hard. The people ran around picking up the goodies. They popped their things into a big wicker basket. Then they ran away.
My, piped Kankie. I'm sorry they left. They made such pretty sounds.
"Yes, they did," Kankie replied Daddy.
Let's go over to where they were, Daddy. Maybe they left something good to eat.
"Okay, Kankie." And up they hopped. Daddy hopped, and Kankie followed, taking 2 hops for every one of Daddy. Of course, Daddy got there first, but Kankie was hopping as fast as he could to catch up. And just as he started his last hop, he saw he was going to land square on the gay box that the man had been pulling out and pushing in. But it was too late. He couldn't miss it. And then he landed. "What was that?" shouted Daddy.
It was only me. Look what I hopped on.
Then Kankie backed up 5 feet, for he was going to try it again.
Watch, Daddy.
And Kankie leaped and landed square on the gay box. "Kankie," said Daddy, "you're a musician." Kankie felt wonderful. He could do something nobody else in the forest could do. He could make music.
I'm going to take this back and show Mommy. Won't she be surprised?
"She sure will, son," said Daddy. Well, Mummy certainly was surprised when she first saw the concertina. And to show her how well he could play it, Kankie proudly backed up 5 feet, took a deep breath, and with a mighty leap landed smack on the black button. Mummy was so proud that she had to tell all the lady kangaroos about her Kankie. How every time he hopped, he'd land right on the button. Her Kankie never missed. Now one day, Kankie hurriedly looked around for his daddy.
Daddy!
He cried.
I've got something to show you.
"What is it, Kankie? What have you got to show me?"
Watch me, Daddy.
Kankie put his concertina on the ground as usual, backed away 5 feet as usual, when Daddy said, "Now, look here, Kankie. I've seen you do this lots of times. Why did you have to call me just to watch you do it again?"
That's just it, said Kankie. Watch and you'll see why I called.
Kankie stood there, took a deep breath, another deep breath, got all set, and he hopped.
But this time he didn't land on the concertina. He sailed 3 feet beyond it. "See, Daddy," said Kankie, "I'm an 8-foot hopper now."
Daddy wasn't too convinced. "Let me see you do that again," he said.
Okay,
Said Kankie. He backed up 5 feet, took a deep breath, then another, and hopped.
Sure enough, he sailed 3 feet past the concertina.
"Well," said Daddy, "now you can hop almost as far as we hop a kangaroo." That's all Kankie had to hear, for in his mind, he was now a man-kangaroo. Mommy was happy when she heard the news, but it worried her too. "Now he may get big ideas," she said to Daddy. "He may even think he can hop alone in the forest as he pleases. But, Daddy, you know how dangerous it is in the forest. And Kankie is still such a baby."
Mommy, I'm not a baby. I'm an 8-foot hopper.
Mommy turned her soulful eyes to Daddy and said, "See, that's what I was afraid of. He thinks he's a man." Sure enough, a few days later, Kankie hopped over and very manfully said,
Mommy, I think I'll go over to the other side of the forest and see Cousin Wallaby. He's never seen my concertina.
Now Mommy really was worried. Yes, Mommy really was worried. "Kankie," she said, "you know Cousin Wallaby lives way past where the dreadful dingoes roam. And the dingo is a ferocious wolf-like dog that's the enemy of all us kangaroos."
Why, said Kankie, that's nothing. I'm an 8-foot hopper now, and I can hop faster than any dingo can run.
"Maybe you can," said Mommy, "but don't you ever dare try to go to Cousin Wallaby's alone." "You heard what your mother said," repeated Daddy. "Don't you ever dare try to go to Cousin Wallaby's alone." Kankie thought to himself,
They still think I'm a baby, and I don't know how to take care of myself. I'll show them. I'm going to Cousin Wallaby's, and I'm going alone.
Sure enough, the very next morning, Kankie decided he was going. He picked up his concertina ever so carefully so there wouldn't be a sound, and hopped little hops to the edge of the kangaroo village. It was a beautiful day in the forest, and Kankie was on his way, his concertina tightly clutched in his arms. Not a care in the world had he. As he hopped along, Kankie thought back to that lucky day when he first discovered the concertina. He could still hear how it sounded. But all of a sudden, a terrible thing happened. On one of Kankie's 8-foot hops, the concertina fell out of his hands and disappeared from view. Kankie was so startled he didn't know what had happened. But it didn't take him long to realize his concertina was missing. So he looked around, and around, and around. But the more he looked, the more worried he became.
Oh!
Wailed Kankie.
Where is my concertina? I just have to find you.
And 3 big tears welled over and dropped on his nose. Plunk, plunk, plunk. Now Kankie was so anxious to find his concertina, he didn't realize he'd wandered off the path through the forest. Suddenly, Kankie heard an unfamiliar sound. He stopped short in his tracks. And then he caught a glimpse that sent a chill of terror down his spine and through his tail. For there in the bushes were 3 snarling dingoes. He remembered how he boasted to his mother that he wasn't afraid. But now that he could actually see the dingoes and see their big, long, white teeth, he was afraid as he could be. To make matters worse, right at that moment, they started to come at Kankie. Quick as a flash, Kankie whirled on his big tail and started to hop away from them. But the dingoes kept right after him. Suddenly, a big, deep pit loomed in front of Kankie. But Kankie was going so fast, he didn't have time to hop over it, and he saw that he was
going to land smack in the middle of the pit.
Oh, they'll catch me sure. What'll I do? What'll I do?
Down Kankie sailed into the big hole. And what do you know? When he reached the bottom, instead of landing on the soft dirt, he landed right on top of his concertina. For a second, he was happy because he found his concertina. But the barking of the dingoes around the edge of the pit reminded him of his danger.
Mommy and Daddy, I wonder where they are. If they were only here, they would help me.
And then Kankie had an idea. His concertina would help him. He started jumping up and down on it as hard as he could, and as fast as he could. The harder he jumped, the louder it played. It seemed to say,
Help me, help me, help me.
back in the village, Mommy and Daddy Kangaroo did hear the concertina. Oh, Daddy, do you think it's the dingoes? Cried Mommy. Do you think they've caught our Kankie? We're not going to find out standing here, yelled Daddy. Come on, men. And almost in a body, all the men kangaroos started to hop furiously toward the sound of the concertina. Up and over they hopped. Up and over they hopped. Pretty soon they were close to the pit. Wait, men, shouted Daddy. The sound's coming from that pit over there. Those dingoes are trying to get to Kankie. But there are 10 of us and only 3 of them. Let's get them. So they leaped in at the snarling dingoes. The kangaroos jumped up and down. They thrashed their big tails back and forth as fast as they could. This was much too much for the cowardly dingoes. They tucked their tails between their legs and ran away into the forest. By this time, Mummy Kangaroo had caught up with Daddy, and she hopped over to the edge of the pit. She called softly, Kankie.
Yes, Mommy.
He answered meekly.
Please help me out.
Daddy was all set to give Kankie a big lecture for going into the woods alone. But he realized Kankie had learned his lesson. So without saying a word, he let his big tail flop over the edge of the pit. And Kankie, with a hop and a pull, landed up on the ground again.
Mommy, I'm sorry I went into the woods alone. I'm never going to disobey you again.
Daddy cleared his throat. He said, Kankie, we were going to keep it a surprise, but Cousin Wallaby is coming to see you for a visit next week, and you can play your concertina for him then.
Oh, that's wonderful,
said Kankie. So they started to hop happily back to the village. Kankie hopped 2 big hops ahead. And then he turned around and said,
Wait a minute, Mommy.
Gently he placed his concertina on the ground and called, Hop, Mommy, gracefully through the air. And landed right on Kankie's concertina.
Listen, Mommy,
said Kankie.
now you can play too.